This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good looking friends. I don't know why no one is bothering to talk about this with Princess Eugenie, but around the time last year when Prince Andrew and Fergie were being outed for continuing their relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and this is before all the files came out, Princess Eugenie decided to launch this anti-slavery campaign that belongs to this charity that she's been running. Now, what is interesting is recognizing the timing of all of it. And what we're starting to see here is a pattern. Is Princess Eugenie really committed to the organization she co-founded, the Anti-Slavery Collection, calling for governments to take the underground world of counterfeiting more seriously and crack down on abuses like forced labor, child labor, sex trafficking, and human trafficking? I don't know. Or is this more for PR purposes and damage control? I'm thinking that it's more like the latter. I think we all know that People magazine is the go-to media outlet for the royals to push out positive press about them. And I think during this time, Eugenie and her PR took the opportunity to counter the negative press that was coming out about her parents by putting out positive press and separating herself and distancing herself from the whole scandal. Again, like I said, the royals are always about the optics. How is it going to look? And I think in this case, it's about, well, look, Eugenie is running this organization that focuses on combating human trafficking and sex trafficking. Why would she be connected to anything that her parents were connected to? Or even questioning that Eugenie and Beatrice had any kind of idea as to the type of business that Jeffrey Epstein was up to with his parents. Now, it's my opinion, but I do think the origins for Eugenie to focus in this specific area comes out of her parents being connected to Jeffrey Epstein and was a part of helping rehabilitate Sarah Ferguson's brand. Because back in 2010, 2012 era, this is when Sarah's financial woes came out into the public, of her trying to sell access to Andrew. I mean, all kinds of scandals that Fergie was tied to. And I think what we're seeing now with Eugenie and Fergie being in the UAE was similar to what was going on in 2012 when they went off to India. Fergie was in this brand rehabilitation mode to where, according to Eugenie, said that it was on this trip in India she felt inspired to start with her mom this initiative called Keys to Freedom. The purpose established was to sell products made by trafficked women supported by the Women's Interlink Foundation. And what we started to see was Sarah Ferguson become really active in the children's and women's charity space. And for the most part, it worked. For a good 5 years before 2016, we had Sarah Ferguson pretty much out and about in New York. She was doing her own thing, writing her children's book and keeping a low profile. We really didn't hear much after that about Eugenie's Keys to Freedom. Now, according to the website, Key to Freedom, the story goes that Key to Freedom is an initiative founded by the York family to support and find a route to market for products made by the Women's Interlink Foundation. WIF provides vulnerable young women from West Bengal, India, with skills to earn an income. Key to Freedom facilitates a route to market for the garments and products created by the young women through retailers including Topshop and Royal Collection. The York family have also commissioned various products which are used as part of their projects. Yeah, I do think this definitely was a part of the damage control by the palace to clean up the image of the York family, because let's not forget that Andrew was pictured and seen coming out of Epstein's apartment in 2010, and then you had Sarah Ferguson with all these scandals selling access to Andrew. Yeah, it didn't look so good for the York family at the time, and I do think the Queen wanted it cleaned up. And here we have this organization that was set up to make it look like they were against human trafficking and supporting women. This was done in the year of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. And let's not forget, the year prior was when Sarah Ferguson did that interview with The Standard calling Jeffrey Epstein a pedophile. And then also, ABC News was threatened by the palace to not air the story about Epstein. So there was a lot of cover up that was going on by the palace to keep the brand intact. And it clearly worked because I think for 5 years, there wasn't very much activity going on pertaining to that until 2016, 2017, when it kicked off again with lawsuits being dropped against Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell by people like Sarah Ramon and Virginia Giuffre. It was that same year in 2017 when Eugenie launched her anti-slavery collective, which, when you read the mission statement, it says an independent collective whose mission is to bring change makers together to raise awareness for modern slavery as a global epidemic. Do I think it's a coincidence that every time Andrew's name or Sarah's name blows up in the media connected to Epstein and trafficking women, here comes Eugenie with her organization trying to fight and combat human trafficking and, modern slavery? No, I don't. It's always been about the PR and the optics. How does it look? Then in 2018, right after that, we started to see this buildup of Me Too, Time's Up, and Harvey Weinstein. We began to see this photo surface of Harvey Weinstein, Epstein, and Ghislaine Maxwell at Princess Beatrice's 18th birthday. And at this point, we saw this movement, the movement that Meghan pretended to be a part of in championing and being supportive of women. We then start to see Eugenie being more proactive in fighting human slavery and supporting women who have been trafficked. And throughout this time, never once talking about Epstein and those victims. Now, at the time, I admit, I wasn't paying attention to Princess Eugenie until Meghan Markle came onto the scene, to where we saw all these photos of Meghan Markle and Eugenie and the connections that Meghan had with Andrew and the Yorks. And then in 2022, when things started to really kick up between Virginia Giuffre and Andrew right before the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, it was then that it clicked for me that Eugenie was running an organization of which her father was potentially involved in committing the same crimes that she's speaking out against. And I found that kind of weird. But it's all starting to make sense now, because in these files, we're now starting to see what was going on behind the scenes and the enormous lengths that many people were taking to protect their so-called image. Sarah, Andrew, we also had Epstein, Reid Hoffman was in there trying to mitigate damage for Epstein, and we see how Meghan and Harry do it. So now if we go back to 2023 and we look at this podcaster named Marisol Nichols, who did an interview with Princess Eugenie, the jokes literally write themselves.
My guest today is Her Royal Highness, Princess Eugenie. She has spoken with world leaders at the Nexus Global Summit and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe's Alliance.
The crazy thing about this is that all of these people that Marisol just listed off are most certainly aware of this so-called elite network and what these wealthy people do with human trafficking in children. We know this now from the files.
And can you take my audience through back in 2012 when you first started learning about this issue and sort of how you began this journey?
Yeah, so in 2012, I went to India with my mum and my best friend Jules, who I set up the Anti-Slavery Collective with. And we went to meet this woman called Aloka Mitra, who set up a charity called the Women's Interlink Foundation. And she's this lovely mama in Calcutta, and she rescues trafficked women from the streets, and she puts them in a home, and she teaches them how to print on fabrics, how to make bags, how to do scarves, how to make, beautiful Indian silk dresses and beautiful products like that. And these girls, when they learn how to do this, they then sell their products. It gives them a wage, it gives them sort of a skill, it gives them a focus, and then they are not vulnerable to being re-trafficked or going back to their traffickers, which is a lot of the time what happens. And when we went out there, we realized these products were so beautiful, so we sort of set up this little organization called Key to Freedom, and we those products, we sold them online, and we partnered with Topshop and different organizations to
Amazing.
sell these products, and then the girls would get the money.
So now why does this sound so familiar? Oh, right. It's because Meghan Markle did something similar. Remember, Meghan invested and promoted Sesta Collective, which was a brand that sells hand-woven handbags made by women in Rwanda, Africa. And then this company got called out because this company that Meghan invested in were selling these handbags for £700, and they were considered ethical, but were paying these women as little as 10 pence per hour to make these so-called 700-pound bags. That, by the way, Meghan made a commission every time a bag was sold. Meghan said at the time, when she was inspired to invest into these handbags, was by an experience during the time when she was in the royal family and realizing her power of influence. So you almost have to wonder if Eugenie's Key to Freedom was set up in a similar fashion to where Eugenie was also making on the back end a small little commission off of the various products that these women in India were making and being sold in this agreement with Topshop.
So it was really a lovely, special thing to do. And I think that's definitely something that was our first understanding of, or hearing the term modern slavery. I was 21. I'd only ever heard of slavery that we read about and learn about in school. And, this was a new, very different term and terminology. And we kind of thought, I didn't realize it existed. Let's delve into this. Let's become our investigators, our detectives. And we came back to the UK and we met with as many people who would listen and take a meeting with us, and learn sort of around the legislation, around who was leading the fight, what was happening. And we basically realized that someone is enslaved within a mile of where you live. And it's such a hidden crime. It's something that definitely goes under the radar with a lot of exploited people.
So if we give Eugenie the benefit of the doubt, and she is in this discovery mode and learning about the different types of slavery and exploitation, throughout her childhood as well as her teen years and then into her early adulthood, being around people like Epstein and Weinstein and seeing, what's going on, don't you think you would pick up and say, maybe what these victims are saying might have some actual truth to it? And then also, look at what's going on in the UK with these grooming gangs. You mean to tell me that Eugenie, who is a co-founder of this organization, can't use her voice to talk about the grooming gangs and what they're doing to these girls who are being exploited? If you know that this is going on within a mile of your house and, in this case, the whole damn country, why are you not using your voice and your platform?
Let's go and start a collective, the Anti-Slavery Collective, to raise awareness and bring people together to end modern slavery. And we've been doing it now for a few years, and we're really proud. And we're really proud of our work we do with survivors. That's something that is so key to us, to always be remembering, the survivor voice and what they're going through.
Where is your voice, Eugenie, for these British girls? Where is your voice for all those girls that were trafficked under Epstein that your father most likely knew about? At bare minimum, couldn't you have a conversation with your dad and advise him to just apologize? Think about how much more impactful this would have been had Eugenie stepped up and told her father, look, you need to get up there, eat some humble pie, and I'll be standing there right next to you telling you that it was wrong. Think about the impact that would have made.
It's beautiful, and I love that. And I know that feeling of coming face to face with a survivor and seeing that light is still in them, and that drive is still in them to now take what they've been through and do something with it and help make a difference. And it's just so beautiful. And I really do understand. And I love what you said about trafficking happens within a mile of wherever your home is. And I've never heard that. And it's so true. And I think when I'm educating people about it, they don't realize that because they think It's India, it's Pakistan, it's the Philippines, it's, Thailand. It doesn't happen here or down the street. And they're always shocked to learn that no, trafficking is anywhere where there's vulnerability.
And you see, Eugenie is shaking her head in agreement. So she knows very well it's not just the slums in India or Philippines, Thailand. She knows very well that things are happening in Europe.
I think also what's kind of hard to translate for people unless you're in the movement is that trafficking the word trafficking exists for so many different things, but it could be construction, it could be it could be unfair pay,
Right.
people working, people whose their employers are holding their passports and things like that.
Right.
That is a form of slavery, it's a form of trafficking.
100%.
We know that that's exactly what Epstein was doing, especially holding back those passports from Eastern European girls coming from Russia, Ukraine, Poland, Latvia. She sounds really ignorant here. Obviously, she understands that withholding passports is a sign of trafficking, but getting paid unfairly? I'm sorry, but in corporate America, it happens all the time. Are we to assume that all of the people working legitimately in America who are not getting paid the same as maybe some of their counterparts is considered trafficking? No, I don't think so.
That's what's difficult, is that to it not just be about either sex trafficking, or when you think about brothels in Thailand, it's
Right.
it's also whether or not your cleaner or your driver or people are being paid correctly.
Again, sounds like pure ignorance. It should be whether or not if people are getting paid legally, or they're not getting paid at all because they are paying off some kind of debt. Like, she fails to talk about any of that.
That's what I think it has to be translated for people, and you have to, that's what we're raising awareness for, is like, have you asked the question, where are your clothes coming from? As an English person, we don't really ask questions, we kind of, it's not really us, there's something to do. But if you see someone in a situation, ask them, check how they are. Are they okay? Is there someone?
Did Eugenie do any of that when she was out partying in the New York nightlife during a time when all of those Eastern European models who were hanging out at the Soho House, who couldn't speak a lick of English and looked very much underage? Did Eugenie bother to ask them if they were okay? I somehow doubt it.
I did this event a while back, and we brought on someone who was an expert in finding those people who are brought to this country and are stuck in a life where they work, all day long for no pay. They can't leave, they can't quit, and they're held against their will. And that's 100% a form of modern day slavery and trafficking. And one of the things that she also talked about was, when you go to those sort of like all you can eat, well, you probably don't, but all you can eat, like Chinese buffets or whatever, all you can eat, like these places, right? And you look inside and there's cameras, but the cameras are in the inside.
Now, I'm not sure if Eugenie and Beatrice ever went to any of Epstein's properties, but I would imagine so, because at one point, Sarah and her daughters became fixtures in the New York fashion art world. It is possible that some of the blacked out photos of girls at Epstein's various locations could have been Eugenie and Beatrice.
You would think cameras would be on the outside. And so we went through a whole thing of these certain things to look for, and then to report it. And it's so true that I love that you were at an event where just someone was like, oh, I've seen that.
Yeah.
I know something about that, because it is that prevalent and it's right under our noses and people do not know.
Somehow, I think that Eugenie and Beatrice didn't know because what they saw looked perfectly normal to them, because that's what they're used to. That's all they know. But one would think if you are leading an organization which is specifically focused on educating people, then afterwards you would come to some sort of epiphany and say, oh my God, this has been going on. I saw it at the Soho House. I saw it in Palm Beach. I saw it in New York at these parties that I was at.
Okay, so let's talk about the Anti-Slavery Collective. Can you tell me about how you and your partner Jules or Julia started this, and what it is that you all do?
Yeah, so We started it in 2017 when we went to visit the safe house and we met Seema, and we realized that then there isn't there we never want to reinvent the wheel. People have been doing this for so many years. It's like people are already doing the great work. We just wanted to be able to shout about it louder, and make sure that people are aware of what, the great things that are happening. Because I think I was explaining that so often this can feel really frustrating and like you can't do anything about it, and how difficult that can be. But actually, there are some hopeful things happening, and we want to bring that to people's mindsets, So we wanted to become a...
You notice she's not explaining any of the solutions. Sure, they say that they work with these victims. Doing what? How are you helping them? When you listen to what Eugenie is saying, it's all very generic. And you hear all of the same buzzwords that get thrown around if you are pushing the global agenda for the UN and the World Economic Forum.
Convening space for charities and organizations and survivors and people to learn about, modern slavery and what they can do, but also sort of bring it to the masses, get everyone out there asking the question and making sure what they're doing is not exacerbating a situation for people,
And this is what Harry and Meghan do. They really do think that their royal brand is enough to influence others, when really what needs to happen here is to hold people accountable. Like, what's the sense of having these education talks and making people aware if nothing is being done and nothing is being solved? And the very same people that you are talking to in these so-called meetings are the same ones who are behind the scenes secretively causing all of this pain and suffering.
We are all about the survivor voice, bringing their voice, to the forefront of people's minds. We do regular visits with them. We've got our own podcast, which you very kindly came on. We do little events. Our strategic pillars are focusing on education. So we really want to try and hit as many young people as possible to really know, like, it's not just about trafficking, it's about like empathy and understanding vulnerability and not to feel alone. Like, where do you go when this happens, or like, how do you know what your rights are and things like that. So it's...
You see, what Eugenie is explaining here is that what she is doing is essentially what Archwell is doing. It's bringing together other NGOs to do the actual work, put together the actual research, and wherever the money is coming from, whether it be donations from the government or private donations, it works the same way as all these other NGOs that are trying to make a difference in the world. But really, it's being done for selfish reasons. Here, Eugenie is probably doing this as a vanity project to keep good press surrounding her, especially weathering through the storm with Epstein. Has she said anything recently or spoken out about it? No, she hasn't, because at this point, it's kind of laughable that she is, running this organization, and there is her father, and there she is knowing this guy and didn't do a thing about it. She's an adult right now, and I get that speaking out against your parents is not really the best thing to do, but in this case and scenario, do the right thing. You can't be representing a charity that is supposed to be fighting for these victims when you remain silent about your own father, who has been a part of the problem.
That's quite key. Education is very much our focus. And then campaigning, and also responsible consumerism. So working with businesses that really look after their employees, but also want to check their supply chains and want to know, want to be the leaders of this, because there are companies out there that are doing so many amazing things. And nowadays businesses have to work, 5 times harder than everybody else, because they've got climate change, they've got mental health, you've got modern slavery, you've got, these companies that they've got really, really hardcore consumers who are going to hold them to account.
Yeah, I think if Eugenie was really passionate and serious about those supply chains and the fashion world and what is going on there, then she should speak up about Victoria's Secret and Les Wexner and the operation that was going on with Jeffrey Epstein. Now that we know everything, it's not too late, Eugenie. You can use this as an example.
And if you've got slavery in your supply chain, it's bad for business. So that really is one of our other strategic pillars, is just focusing on how companies, we don't want to point the finger and say you're doing a bad job. We want people to know that this is okay and we can do something about it together. And there are amazing charities and NGOs and organizations that can help.
I think we're in a new era where many of us should be wary whenever we hear the Epstein class talk about NGOs. Because are they really doing it to make an impact and help people, or are they doing it for selfish reasons? Is it for helping their brand, for good PR, or is it to make money?
I love that so much. It's funny because I focus so much on the sex trafficking. It's just sort of the niche that I, through doing this, fell into. But they do tie over, when you look at supply chains and most, this comes out in the fashion industry every once in a while, like probably once every couple of years. It's like, and it comes out that these companies have in their supply chains slave labor.
And there you go, Eugenie confirming that she knows exactly what Marisol's talking about because she witnessed it. Eugenie was at these fashion parties and events in New York, so she definitely did see these Eastern European women running around with these wealthy, old, nasty men.
When you trace it all the way back, where are the clothes coming from, like you mentioned? And, I would hope, I like to optimistically say perhaps the CEOs don't know that.
I think Marisol has an idea that the CEOs do know, and they also are involved. I think now we understand that many of these wealthy CEOs are into some freaky deaky shit. Now, if you get a chance, go ahead and take a look at this woman's channel. I do get the feeling that she genuinely and sincerely wants to help these victims out and bring awareness to this problem that we have. Like when you look at her nonprofit, she really isn't making any kind of money from it. And we're talking like assets of $50,000. I mean, she has been doing this, and you can see that she goes along for ride-alongs with cops and so forth, trying to stop these very, very bad human beings. But when you look at Eugenie's foundation or organization that's set up here, it's got a couple million sitting in it in assets. And you say to yourself, like, who's really doing this out of the kindness of their heart and who is really doing this for profit and prestige?
From what I've found, and I don't know what you've found in the UK, but I have found that at least in America, legislation and Congress and everyone are still just catching up to the problem. Like there's not enough laws in place yet.
Yeah, the UK have been like the leaders of the pack when it comes to legislation. So Theresa May, our former prime minister, who's actually a board member on our charity, she sort of founded the Modern Slavery Act in 2015, which was the first type of legislation that really sort of gave law enforcement and the judicial system a framework of which to prosecute and work with.
Well, that's all good and nice, Eugenie, but what's the sense of having a framework if the framework is not being executed on? And it's like laughable that Eugenie thinks that the UK is leading the charge on stopping modern slavery. Like, the jokes make themselves.
Wow.
It's the Modern Slavery Act, but I don't know about America.
And this right here just goes to show Eugenie's so-called commitment and passion to actually solve this problem. Because how do you not know, especially if your organization, one of its core pillars is education, to understand what is going on globally, especially in countries like the United States of America? One would think you would do some research to understand what's working and what's not working. Especially back in 2023 when this was recorded and Open Borders was responsible for the explosion of human trafficking, especially with children, then Eugenie would then recognize that her Agenda 2030 might not be also sound, and that is part of the problem.
I out of interest, just to go back, when you went there, were you undercover? I mean, did you just go And have you spoken to the company who's like, how did you get in there? Sorry, now I'm turning the questions on you.
No. It's all good. It's all good. We were undercover. We were looking for a little boy who had been trafficked out of Haiti for a while back, and we had gotten a tip where this kid may have been in that camp. So we were there. It was after a bunch of other operations that we had done, and so since we were already in those countries, we went to go see if he was possibly being held there and part of this slave labor camp, and he was not, unfortunately.
And I mean, one thing, how do you get then the company to how do you show them what you found?
I have no clue. It's on these ops. I'm sort of along for the ride. I get told what we're doing. I don't put them together. I just get a phone call. Can you come? And I'll go. Wow. And it's, as you said, like it's me and like 3 employees for Slavery Free World. We're doing it all. And it's sort of like, one of the things that we focus on is the education, but mainly from a preventative side. Because I was sort of like, look, I'm not law enforcement, although I did think of quitting acting and becoming law enforcement so I could continue to do this. Right. But it was sort of like, okay, well, I have this platform. Young kids watch Riverdale, teenagers watch Riverdale, moms watch Riverdale, teachers watch Riverdale. Let me use that audience and do what I can with them directly so that I can educate them enough of what to look for, how to help protect themselves, their families, their loved ones, and from ever falling into the hands of these predators. But I focus mainly on sex trafficking because of it's just sort of where my background is and where I fell into. So
do you guys see the difference here with Marisol and her passion for trying to prevent human trafficking versus Eugenie's so-called passion?
So that's why we started doing it. And, we do it for SEMA and all the survivors that we work with. We want to get the message across there that this happens, this exists, and it's a man-made problem. Society makes these issues, and we can end it.
What I'm seeing from these Epstein files is that these people know this stuff is happening. It's happening at the highest levels, and everybody is looking the other way. What's the sense of talking about it if no action is being taken? So what's the solution, Eugenie? You just keep talking about it in hopes that someone will have a change of heart and change their evil ways? That's not how this works. There needs to be accountability. People need to be locked up. They need to be talking about those things. You're going to be educating people and, lifting them up with your inspiring words. Like, I don't think that that's good enough. It's not good enough anymore.
We have, in my mind, we've got to do right by these women and girls and boys and men. And, the right way of doing it is by saying, like, it's okay. Like, let's all do it together. These are the resources. This is what you look for. Like, if you don't know, like, if you walk past someone on the street and you think they're having a trouble, what on earth are you meant to do if you don't know where your tools are and how you can access the information? Like, people are stuck.
No, I don't necessarily think people are stuck. I think people are just afraid of getting killed. Because when you have a system that's fundamentally corrupt and broken, how can you make change if the bad people are running the show? You can have all the tools in the world, but if the tools are broken, what good are they?
And then you feel so helpless. But if you give them, the right information, what to do, how to help, it just gives you that little bit of extra something that you're not just blinkers on throughout the whole of your life,
If I didn't know any better, that sounded kind of like an admission. Maybe you were just minding your own business when all of this stuff was going down with Epstein.
Yes, I love that you mentioned that about that story that you were telling me, and about being in the UK where people probably aren't used to invading other people's space. It's impolite. The same thing in America. Like, it's surprising to me that people won't just go, "Hey, do you need some help? Hey, are you okay?" And there's a campaign that's out that's finally like, look, if you see something, say something. Right. And I'm glad that's coming out, because it is right under all of our noses. And once you're educated, and I don't know if you found this, but once I educate people, or someone have heard me speak or listen to the podcast, all of a sudden they're like, oh, did you see this? And did you see this? And they start sending me like all these articles and all these things. It's like your eyes are open and you can't unsee it. Do you find that?
Oh my God. I mean, this is what I was mentioning. I think William Wilberforce, the guy who started the abolition movement, back in the 1800s, he said, you may choose to look the other way, but you can never say you did not know. And obviously that is referring to something 200 years ago. But nowadays it's the same thing. Like, I actually was walking through LAX. I don't know, whenever I was the other day after my daytime job, and I saw these big signs on it, which was all about like modern slavery and sports, and I was just like, this is amazing to me. Finally, that people are looking up on a board and they're seeing the word modern slavery. I mean, not to rabbit on more, but Cindy McCain, who is an amazing woman, she always tells me this story about when she went to all these different conferences that she would go to, like whatever it was, and she'd be standing there and she'd be talking about modern slavery, and people would just be like shutting her down, walking out of the room, not listening. And that was however many years ago. And now all of a sudden she's got a seat at the table. She's talking about huge issues about where trafficking exists, and people are listening to her.
This is the same Cindy McCain who said they knew about Epstein. All of Congress knew about Epstein.
It hides in plain sight. Epstein was hiding in plain sight. We all knew about him. We all knew what he was doing. But we had no one that was, no legal aspect that would go after him. They were afraid of him. For whatever reason, they were afraid of him.
And she always says that like the change from one moment to the next is just extraordinary. And like, that's what I love to see, is like, yes, it's a difficult subject, but the more you know, the more you can do.
But don't dare touch the Epstein class.
When I first set it up, in my head, I was like, I want to be this umbrella organization where we all come together to do something about it. And, if I'm focusing on education, I want to hear from all the charities that are doing stuff on education around this, because if you're doing it, great, I don't need to do it then. But if not, let's work together, and I can share the load with you, and I can talk about it loudly on your podcast or mine or whatever it is, and make sure that it's there. It's right there for people.
Okay, but what is there for people? So far, Eugenie hasn't really said much of substance on this podcast. It's the same exact thing that Archwell does. They get all of these NGOs together, slap their name on it, and then take credit for other people's work. Especially if the value that Eugenie thinks she's bringing to the table is because she's a royal and that's enough to make the impact. I think she's sadly mistaken. Not after watching Harry and Meghan abuse their position and titles to push an organization that is wholly corrupt.
I think there's something around, protecting survivors and making sure that we call it not exacerbating their trauma and not utilizing their story again and again, because at the end of the day, these women and girls, men and boys, they have to tell their story 100 times over. And that doesn't need to be the case. We can advocate on behalf of people that actually just are like, I don't need to re-traumatize myself.
So why not help the Epstein victims? Does anybody think about how traumatized they might be, especially with the death threats they must receive on a daily basis from these high-powered people who did this to them? And yeah, I can understand that maybe Eugenie doesn't want to get involved because it is a bit of a landmine. But if you have this umbrella with these NGOs as well as all of these tools, why not use them? You don't necessarily have to be the one to speak up for them. You have a co-founder that works with you. Let her do it. Okay, maybe you don't want to talk about Epstein. I get it. But how about all of those British girls that are getting gang raped and groomed and even trafficked to Pakistan? Why are you not doing anything about that? There's so much more that you could be doing, Eugenie, with your so-called platform and your royal brand.
And so I think that's really important as well to think about when we're advocating, when people are learning about this subject. It's like, you can advocate on behalf of people.
After listening to this, I do think that Eugenie does mean well, but I don't think that she is doing it for the right purposes. I really see a disconnect here with her truly understanding what's happening with regular people. And the groups that she works with in the so-called collective are of the same mindset. They equally don't understand really what's going on because they are a part of this class. They're part of this class that thinks that they have the answers and are superior to lecture everybody else on what they should be doing. But when it comes time to address their own people who are doing the things that they are virtue signaling about, they remain silent. So you got to say, well, are they really impacting the space or are they just making it worse? And I think in a lot of cases, especially with this Agenda 2030 and the climate change bullshit and trying to meet these stupid goals, they have done a lot of harm. And I do think that right now, at this point, the elites are not winning anybody over by just using their name and thinking that it's enough, because that's not working anymore. And you're going to understand in this final clip what I mean by this disconnect and being able to understand what is really happening with regular people outside of this so-called Epstein class bubble.
Can you talk a little bit about how, as a mom, this sort of work just how it affects you and how it changes everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny. My mum brought me and my sister up to always advocate on behalf of other people. And then I think, so I've always been kind of I've always been I've always wanted to do it. I've never not been that way. And then having two boys, I think, having children in general, it all of a sudden changes you. I now obviously want to do this more than ever before, but I also want them to see me do it, and have that like inspiration of like, oh, mummy wants to change the world. Mummy wants to make it a better place. And there's so little now, 16 weeks. And I don't know if I'm going to date myself or date the podcast, but there's 16 weeks and 2.5. And I want them to treat their friends and I want them to look after people that they might love when they're older. And I want them to be able to protect people if they need to, So I think, I don't know, I want to, with everything, I want to inspire, anyone who I meet about this. And I think, I don't know, that sounds arrogant. I didn't mean to make it sound like that, but I want I want people to see the example and think, okay, cool, like go and pick up the piece of plastic on the beach. I always do that because I just, I want my kid to know that like he can do that too. It's just leading by example, I guess. But I think, yeah, it's interesting.
Now, in this right here, it's obvious Eugenie does not see herself in the same class of people who are vulnerable to be enslaved or trafficked. I mean, she does have two boys, but boys get trafficked too. And in this case, it's clear she knows that her children will never be in a vulnerable position. Eugenie just cares about what her children think of her, that mommy is trying to save the world, right? But if a real parent who doesn't want the same thing to happen to their children, the first thing that would come to your mind is stopping the people who are actually doing it. And this just goes to show that we're not like them, and they're not like us. But if you want to watch the whole interview, I'll put the link below. I just wanted to point this out because I think there is a growing frustration amongst many people seeing these wealthy individuals who preach on how they want to help and they want people to show compassion and kindness, in solving a lot of these problems, when a major source of these problems, like Eugenie said earlier on, are man-made. And if she's really serious about tackling this problem, then she needs to start with the Epstein class of people who have caused these problems in the first place. So if Beatrice and Eugenie are trying to figure out what to do next, well, either you step up and you make a statement about how you condemn the behavior of your parents. I think that will go a long way Just like as if Prince William and Catherine can go ahead and make a statement, you can too, Eugenie and Beatrice. You're adults. It is unfortunate that Eugenie and Beatrice are caught up in this unfortunate situation with their parents. It's not their fault. But at the same time, they are in a position of privilege and power. Yeah, I don't feel that bad. But what do you guys think? Do you see where I'm coming from about Eugenie? Do you believe that she's passionate about stopping anti-trafficking and modern slavery? Or do you think this is being used for the optics to distance herself from this connection to Jeffrey Epstein? Definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
Such a fraud.